This is a story that my dad shared with me. He grew up in a small suburb community of Stowe, Ohio with his parents and older sister. Across the street lived a boy named Richard Wade Cooey. He was the same age as my dad and was described as a scrawny, red-headed troublemaker. He would spit on people as they walked by, and even set a house on fire in the neighborhood and blamed it on a kid who had special needs. Nothing he did as a child, however, could compare to the crime he committed when he was only 19 years old. My dad had just started his sophomore year of college when he heard the news. Richard and his friends, Clinton and Kenneth, were throwing pieces of concrete off a local bridge onto the interstate when one of them struck the vehicle of 21-year-old Wendy Ofrendo. Her friend, 20-year-old Dawn McCreary, was also in the car. They were sorority sisters who had just gotten off work at a local restaurant. At this point, Kenneth decided that he had had enough and went home. This is when Richard and Clinton came up with their evil scheme. Both of the men approached the girls, offering to help them and give them a ride. They drove the girls to a shopping center where they were told to call their parents and let them know they were all right. The two then forced the girls into the back of the car, tied their hands together, and drove them to a field behind a local mall where they were raped, stabbed, and tortured for 3 grueling hours. They abandoned their bodies in the field, but only after they carved large X's on their stomachs. Richard and Clinton then decided they wanted to sell the girls' clothing and jewelry to make some extra cash. When Richard couldn't find a buyer for the items, he burned them in his backyard, which woke my grandparents. My grandfather called the police to report what he thought was yet another neighborhood disturbance from Richard. The police gathered the items for evidence, and after finding Wendy's abandoned car, they arrested Richard and began the investigation. Clinton and Richard were both arrested and charged with the murders. They had found a bloody pocket knife used to stab Wendy in the neck in Clinton's pocket when he was arrested, and some of the burned items still had traces of the girl's blood. Since Clinton was only 17, he was spared the death sentence and is currently serving life in prison. Richard, however, was given the death penalty. On October 14, 2003 at 10 a.m., he was executed by lethal injection. Wendy's family was present at his execution. Every time I visit my grandparents, I look across the street at that house, and I can't help but get the chills. I am a 27-year-old female from West Virginia. To start off, I have 2 siblings, an older brother and a younger sister. My brother is a year older, and my sister is a year younger than me. Yup, I'm the middle child. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my parents got a divorce, and my mom pretty much raised us after that. My mom eventually moved on and got a new boyfriend. The boyfriend ended up becoming very physically, verbally, and emotionally abusive to our mother. He would hit her in front of us, scaring us half to death, and call her names regularly. I remember one night, when I was about 6, cleaning my room, while my sister and my brother were watching TV in my sister's room, we heard them fighting on the porch. We looked out the window and saw him strangling our mom, holding her by her throat against the door. It was traumatizing to say the least. Another time, he started a fight with our mom because while we kids were eating a bag of chips, we were crunching too loudly. Our whole family knew about how abusive he was, and my mom, I assume, was depressed and had low self-esteem due to all the abuse and kept taking him back. My grandparents, my mom's parents, who lived next door and absolutely refused to accept their relationship because of his abuse towards my mom, had made it very clear that he was never to return to their house again. Well, my mom eventually started sneaking him into the house and covering up all the windows with dark sheets. I remember it was always dark in the house and we could never have people over. My mom didn't want to be involved in family events, and I remember it was a very dark time. He was obviously doing his best to keep her from the rest of the family, as most, if not all abusers do to their victims. When my grandparents found out he would be there, they would freak out and call the police to come over and pound on the door to get him out of there. We were sworn to never tell anyone, especially our grandparents, that he was there. One time, my sister told my grandma that he was there, probably because my grandma got it out of her somehow, or she was scared and felt that she needed to tell her. I told my mom that she had told because I saw my grandma coming over with a baseball bat, and I was afraid she would get hurt, so my mom, her boyfriend, and all of us kids piled into the car quickly, and my mom took off in the car before she could make it out of the house. I felt bad because my sister got in trouble, but I also knew that I didn't want my grandma to get hurt. Lastly, I remember the state coming to our school at least 3 times and asking to talk with us kids individually about the abuse. Our mom had warned us to never tell them about any of the abuse taking place in the house towards her, because they might take us away from her and send us to a foster home or something. Eventually, our mother got away from this creep. Even though he pretty much stalked her for years before she could completely get away, we were all very relieved to be away from him. One day, my mom's sister, brother, and I went to the grocery store to fill up our fridge. We had a great day and got a lot of good food and snacks. When we were carrying the groceries into the house, I remember feeling so happy that we didn't have to live on pins and needles anymore. When I walked into the house, I walked straight to my mom's room. I remember I did this because he used to yell at us for going in there, and we were absolutely never allowed to walk into our mom's room. When he wasn't there, our mom would let us do whatever we wanted, and it was a really chill environment, so I just headed straight in there. As I walked into the room, I heard a noise and saw the shower curtain move. I was positive that someone was in the room. I ran out to my mom, who was in the kitchen about to put the stuff away, and looked her straight in the eyes, saying, "Mom, someone is in your room." At first, she thought that I had probably just seen something that was nothing, but after I looked at her with the most serious face that I could muster up and said, "Mom, I seriously saw that man behind your shower curtain. Someone is in your room for real." Her face became pale white as she realized that I was being dead honest and that there was a real chance that someone was in her room. Before she could even respond, a figure popped into the hallway. Standing there wide-eyed and creepy looking as fuck was her ex-boyfriend, and he had the biggest, most sinister grin on his face. My mom was in pure shock. This weirdo broke into our small trailer while we were at the grocery store and was hiding in my mom's shower for when she got home. What the hell? It was terrifying, and I think another fight started that night because she wanted him to leave. I don't know why the cops were never called on her end, but when I grew up, she told me how she used to be good friends with all the cops in town. The creepiest part is that I remember at some point hearing that he was a suspect in a murder investigation of a man because he was apparently the last person to see him before he drowned in a river or something. That makes this even more terrifying. After they actually broke it off for good, years later my mom remarried to a man who never would lay a hand on her. I think she heard from him off and on for years, but I'm assuming that he's moved on to terrorize some other family, because we thankfully have been able to live in peace from that psychopath up to now. If I could give advice to a child who is in a similar situation to what I went through, my advice would be to tell someone. Even though your parent or guardian forbids you not to, or you fear that you would get in trouble or be taken away from your family, you need to tell your school officials or other family members or even police, because what is happening to you is not right, and your parent or guardian who is being abused is being brainwashed by the abuser and will snap out of it and do the right thing once some action has been taken and they realize something wrong has been happening. We ended up being very lucky because we easily could have been murdered that night. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, please just tell someone and don't waste years of your life being miserable like we did. The National Domestic Abuse Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, and if you ever need it, don't be afraid to call. And and to the creeper who stole years of my family's life, for the love of all that is holy, go see a fucking therapist. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you left a like, subscribed, and shared it with your friends. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description for information on how to submit your stories. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Fuck yeah, it is. If you enjoyed this video, for the love of all that is holy, go see a fucking therapist.